We have a mixed crowd here today. Most of us are adults, but we also have young people. And so if I ask this question, I hope the young people won't say, where's this guy coming from? The question is, do you remember what it was like at recess when you were in elementary or middle school? Some of you are saying, yeah, I'm living it. Others, we got to search back in the memory a bit. Well, I certainly remember what it was like. As a boy here at Our Lady of Peace School, I remember enjoying the very simple recesses we used to have after lunch. After lunch, we'd leave the cafeteria and we'd go to our section of the parking lot. The whole parking lot had individual sections, and it's like, don't cross the territories. Something bad will happen. I remember we played kickball once in the lower part of the lot. And at that time, the plaza wasn't there. It was all cow field. And one of our bigger students kicked the ball over the fence into the section where the bulls were at, because it was all cow field with bulls and cows and such. And the nun had to pick up the fence to get it to run underneath the fence, grab the ball before the bull would get startled and run after the kid, and then he'd have to run back into the parking lot. Things we never told Mom and Dad. Just was too good. Well, in any case, I remember playing games, one of them called Four Squares, with just a piece of chalk and maybe a tennis ball or a regular kickball. We'd have a blast outside. But I remember taking the tennis ball once, and a couple of us guys were throwing it against the back wall of the gymnasium. In fact, if you look at the louvers, you can still see the ball that I probably threw up there and got stuck in the louvers of the air conditioning units. In any case, the faster the impact, the faster the ball would come back to us. The thought of that ball hitting the wall is what came to me when I heard the first reading today from the Old Testament book of Sirach. He begins with a litany of horrible vices: wrath, anger, vengeance, injustice. His point is to remind of his readers of two things. First is that we all, at one time or another, every person here has suffered some type of injustice in our lives. When the injustice happens, it seems like we're the only one in the world. The truth of the matter is, every one of us have been slighted. And the second thing is that all of us have processed that hurt one way or the other, and probably more times than not, we have dumped those vices on someone else. We got hurt, and so in a matter of not thinking, we passed on the hurt to somebody else. So Sirach's point is very simple, that a follower of God must, without exception, do something so counterintuitive that it really makes us think twice. What is that thing? Is that we must forgive. We must show mercy if we ourselves expect to be shown forgiveness and mercy in our lives. What we do to others can come back to us. His final words are so simple. And in fact, I know that some people may even make fun of his advice. He says, remember the commandments in order to diffuse the hate. And then he says, remember God's covenant, that if he will be our God, if only we agree to be in a relationship as his loving people. So it's a two-way street. God says, I will love you, I will be your God, but you need to be my people. It's not like we have all the burden or God has all the burden. It's a two-way street. We simply can't do this on our own. We need a relationship with God to even begin to try to respond to the Old Testament reading about forgiveness. Now, I myself, I'm a person who likes to do things on my own. And so it usually takes me time and a couple skinned knees to kind of get back to where I need to be back. There was a time when I remember in 12th grade, My grandmother passed away, and so from the estate, I bought her car. It was a 1969 Ford Maverick. It had no radio. It didn't have a dashboard, so it was pretty primitive. I would change my own tires. I'd wash and wax the car every other weekend. That thing glistened. If rain would hit it, it would disappear. I would change my own spark plugs. I used to even change my own brakes and oil. Those things I did very well until decades later, I bought a new modern car, and now I can't even find the spark plugs or the oil pan. But I'm now on a first-name basis with the people at the garage. They do all that work. Doing things on my own gives me really a great sense of satisfaction. But I have found that when dealing with the important things of life, doing monumental tasks such as forgiveness of someone who really hurt me, or showing mercy to someone who has really been irritable to deal with, I cannot do without significant help, especially the help that comes from Jesus Christ. This is something that St. Peter the Apostle knew very well when he's in dialogue with Jesus in the gospel story. He enters the conversation by trying to get Jesus to give him a quick rule of thumb for the bare minimum of what it takes to forgive. If someone wrongs you or me, he says, what if we tried just 7 times? Is that good enough, Jesus? That's as if to say, hey, this person is beyond reproach. Jesus, some people are just hard heads. Sometimes you just got to give up on these people. But Jesus looks to him, as he does so many times in the gospel. Poor St. Peter, he's always having his hat handed to him. Jesus says, Peter, no one is beyond redemption. And he uses ancient biblical numerology. So when Peter says, do I forgive 7 times? And 7 is the number of perfection. Like, do I forgive him like a whole bunch of times? And Jesus says, no. How about 7 times 77 times? In other words, an unlimited amount of time. Unbridled forgiveness. I think that Jesus knew well that we human beings are sometimes slow to recognize that in the dialogue of human life, we hurt other people. And sometimes God has to point it out, either in gentle ways or by kicking us in the behind really hard. I think the other thing that Jesus knew well is that we human beings are sometimes horribly stubborn to receive correction. But I also think that Jesus knew that eventually most people of good faith do come around to a better self-understanding at one point or the other when we realize that our lives are not complete. Our lives don't seem to fit well when we are not in good relationship with other people or that we need forgiveness. I find that in the closing section and sentences of the gospel today, I find those words horribly frightening. They're haunting. Jesus says to his disciples, so will my heavenly Father do to you, unless each one of you forgives his brother or his sister from their hearts. Not just lip service, not just going through the motions. I mean, how many times did your mom or my mom pull me aside and go, you say you're sorry to your brother. Sorry. And give us some fancy, ugly look with our face. That's when mom would say, oh, see, you do that again, your face will freeze that way or something. That's a mom thing. But it's true. It doesn't mean when you and I are hurt by someone who wrongs us, it doesn't mean that you and I don't have the right to feel hurt. You have every right in the world that when someone does something against you, to feel hurt or angry or embarrassed or sad, all those feelings. You have every right. But not forgiving doesn't necessarily punish them. It punishes us. And we're supposed to be the victim. When we fail to forgive, we put a chain around our neck or our legs or our arms, and we will live with that chain all of our lives unless we finally get up the gumption to either go up to the person and say, look, I know we had our outs. I know that ideologically we're very different, but I want you to know is I don't want to live this way anymore. And I think it's perfectly legitimate, even if we're the victim, if we said, if there's anything that I've done that has hurt you, I want to say I'm sorry. I really am. And you'll be quite surprised that most of the time, no guarantees, most of the time, that person looked to you and say, you know, I kind of felt the same way. I'm glad you approached me because, you know, I feel the same way. I know I've done some things to hurt you, and I think I did it on purpose, actually, and I'm really sorry. So you build a bridge. Maybe it even means to agree to disagree, and I think that's acceptable. That's okay. Like I said, look at with the election and all the other kind of stuff. Some people who love each other dearly have totally different approaches to the election. And both maybe have good, legitimate reasons. But if we let something like an election get between a brother and a sister, a husband and a wife, or best friends, then we're missing the whole point. This is what I've come to learn. That I can't do the most difficult things. That I can do the most difficult things when I give myself permission. In this case, I can do it if I give myself permission to forgive another person or even myself. I believe that this is the deepest meaning found in today's gospel. And perhaps if this gives inspiration, maybe think about this today and maybe throughout the week. You can forgive if you want it to happen. In a moment, we'll be fed at the table of the Eucharist, almost like being fed in the cafeteria. And then it's time to go to recess, to go outside and to enjoy life today. And so after Mass, go grab that tennis ball or whatever kind of game you like and learn the most valuable lesson in life. What you give, you will also receive.